Let me introduce Bruno Bossis, who is professor of musicology, music analysis and computer music, and permanent researcher at the University of Rennes. He is active in the music laboratory there, and what I appreciate particularly much is his book La voix et la machine, la vocalité artificielle dans la musique contemporaine, because there he gives very, very nice analyses of music that uses artificial voices, and also gives an overview, as Hannah already mentioned, that he will do this already now, also now for us today, of various uses of artificial voices. So please, Bruno Bossis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Here are the three different parts of my talk. Before the 20th century, we can consider two categories of tools, objects and concepts. And three people have to be considered: the composer, the interpreter, and of course the musicologist. And I think that there are three actions, of course: composing, that is to say, imagining and forecasting. The second action is making, interpreting, for example, and the third, explaining, that is to say, documenting, explaining, analyzing, and so on and so on. More generally, during the realization of something, at each moment, at each instant, other than the last one, we need three acts, three verbs: to remember what has already been made, to act cleverly as possible, and to forecast what is going to happen later. Or we can say this one: the state of things at the moment, the goal to reach, and how to reach it. Before the 20th century, musicians had to find means to these, and for describing, notating, representing, sorting, etc., etc. These means belong to two categories: real things, paper, pencil, instrument, and so on, or concepts, rules for style, for example, modality, tonality, polyphony, etc. The outbreak of cybernetics and computer science deeply changed the situation, as you know. During the 20th century, the outbreak of this computer science blurs all these categories, or even redefines the way of thinking music and arts. By definition, a computer is at the same time an object, and it contains algorithms. As an object, a computer-based system could be compared with a simple tool, pencil, an instrument, which obey to the laws of physics with a fixed and well-known behavior: piano, clarinet, and so on. However, there is more in a computer, of course. The system is programmable. It is capable of memorizing, capable of knowledge, interacting, adaptive behavior, I think this one is great, learning, and so on. This fact changes everything. The whole system is not only made on physical laws, but on invented models and methods. Models are suitable for formalizing knowledge with vocabulary and grammar. For Nicolas Boulot, in the epistemological field, models are chosen representations between multiple possibilities, and methods could be defined as rules allowing the manipulation of these models. As I said in my book, citing Ami Dahan Dalmidico, models and modelization are the center of the contemporary scientific activity. A model, coming from a science domain or from Mother Nature, can be used in another field, and so on. In the domain of sound synthesis, the term model is sometimes confusing, or we are confused with this term of model. A model in sound synthesis has to be perhaps a concept and not a sound source, perhaps. A method is the way of applying this model. For example, physical modeling synthesis is based on the modelization of a real object. Dimensions, material, and so on. A lot of characteristics are useful. Copying with well-known models coming from nature is a great advantage. On the contrary, the complexity of the construction quickly becomes a problem. Another example is frequency modulation. This time, the model is a concept, a real concept, that is to say the method being its application in C-Sound, Max, or whatever software you use. And the program, or the software Chant from IRCAM, is part of the analysis synthesis model, and it used the FOF, F-O-F, function d'onde formantic for people at IRCAM. This is a real complexity because there are models, methods, and software are not related with simple relations. Okay. In the case of artificial vocality now, the situation is even more complex. At the beginning, two possibilities are available. Natural sound sources. These voices will be used in different ways and transformed. And synthesis, second, in synthesis from no sound with just algorithms. A third possibility is, of course, composing with analysis synthesis. One can consider the analysis step as a transformation from sound source, real model, real object, toward a concept model. Is the real model forgotten, blurred, or mixed with other models? It depends. It depends on the will, on the wish of the composer. In L'Esprit des Dunes by Tristan Muraille, two real voices are used as sound models, a Tibetan religious choir and a diphonic song. For my students, I always compare these ghosts' appearances in the music with Turner's paintings, or more accurately, maybe, for voices, with Francis Bacon paintings. Tristan Muraille says, in L'Esprit des Dunes, realized with powerful software, it was patchwork at the time, and additive, I was able to analyze in details the process of sound evolution. Thus, I could evaluate in the duration the contour lines and forms of the spectral evolutions. This method opened the way toward utterly new possibilities. End of the quote. In this piece, a natural model exists, the recorded voices. The result in the Muraille's piece is interesting, of course. On one hand, we have the transformations of natural voices by analysis synthesis. On the other hand, Muraille gets the contour of the upper part of the diphonic recorded voice and uses it as a model for composing the oboe at the beginning of the piece. It's just a contour. With the introduction of computer science in composition, the situation isn't so easy to deal with, so I propose to begin with a new classification. I'm going to start with the classification of Fauretti and Sinan-Ray. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. They describe several types of synthesis for the voice in the context of telecommunications. My first job was engineering in telecommunications. However, they don't explain whether they are models or methods. In 1985, 2 years later, Dodge and Gers, you know Charles Dodge, of course, prefer LPC for the speaking synthesis. The typology is larger. In 1989, Fatus proposes an even larger typology, as he names them synthesis techniques, mixing different hierarchical levels. In 1991, for Julius Orion Smith from Karma, Stanford University, there are 4 families available, as you can see. And in 1996, for Curtis Rhodes, the categories are slightly different. For the painter now, the pictorial model is the person or the landscape or whatever is represented. The model in the factual reality. As for the voice, the model can be the sound of a particular voice, my voice, for example, with a particular spectral characteristic depending on the person's body and the person's psychological state. If I'm afraid, I mean like that. For the composer, the model is the voice itself as a sound or a theoretical model used in the architecture of the music, as we saw in the Murray's piece. In consequence, we get 2 ways of dealing with the notion of model. The next point is easier. I'm going to be faster on the well-known question of how to synthesize a voice. First, in 1964, Jean-Claude Risset started to try to imitate the sound of the trumpet with Music 5, with additive synthesis. The story is well known. At Karma, people use the phase vocoder. One find a similar system in the super phase vocoder at IRCAM now, still improved, and used in AudioSculpt, for example. The computation is quite expensive. The frequency modulation. Initially developed in telecommunication, frequency modulation resolved the problem of power. In the 70s, John Chowning invents the digital frequency modulation for synthesizing sounds. With weak computers at that time, he was able to produce real rich spectrums. With the help of the composer, I analyzed myself as a musicologist several years ago with John Chowning, stria and phone. Stria is not with voice, but phone, yes. In phone, Chowning applies frequency modulation specifically for the voice. Dialogue is managed between 2 sorts of sounds. Percussive sounds are opposed to vowels produced as a singing voice. The dialogue contains some interpolations between vowels and bells, for instance. The difficulty is to produce harmonics and formants with frequency modulation and to control all these things. The process is completed by a subtle work on vibrato, of course. As you know, vibrato is an important parameter in human voice, especially in stable sounds in singing. Without vibrato, it's difficult or even impossible to recognize a voice in a sound. In order to emphasize the contrast, vibrato is applied only on vowels in phone by churning, never on percussive sounds. So it's easy to deal with the perception of voice or not voice. Okay? As I explained earlier, there are two possibilities. On one hand, the sound of the voice as a real natural model, and on the other hand, the parameters of the voice as an abstract model. The first possibility can be understood as transforming recorded vocal sounds by filters, LPC, FFT, PSOLA, and so on and so on. I'm going to take a few examples from my own work as analyzing pieces with the composers. In her opera, L'amour de loin, Kaya Saariaho, as often in her music, use comb filters, more precisely, as often, tuned comb filters. The point is to transform the sounds with an harmony in order to obtain a vocal texture with spectral colors provided by chords. Of course, those chords come from the orchestral context. It's an opera. And in this opera, they are attached with characters. Each character has a chord or a set of chords. Thus, the main characters really color the orchestra in real time, as in earlier piece by Saariaho, which is called Lonh, L-O-N-H. The text is inspired by the troubadour Geoffrey Rudel. Extracts of Lonh are even cited in the opera. The libretto tells us the story of Geoffrey, the Countess of Tripoli, and a peregrine. Three characters: Geoffrey, the Countess, and a peregrine. The electronics is particularly on the foreground in the second part of the second act. The system is based on Max with Spat, with the help of Jean-Baptiste Barrière. The singers often whispered. The vocal sounds are analyzed with the phase vocoder, real time. Then the result is separated in two groups: the harmonic sounds, that is to say the vowels, and the inharmonic sounds, the consonants. The consonants are transformed in real time by comb filters, and the central frequencies of the units of the comb filters are given by the orchestral instruments. This is the Terhart algorithm. The partials are sorted by their amplitude, of course. Thus, a dynamic spectral profile is generated and used on the consonants. The consonants are colored. To avoid jumps from a profile to the next one, there is a process of interpolation during the max work. Moreover, in the score, each character possesses his own harmonic signature, that is, a chord or several chords. In consequence, for instance, the chords associated to Geoffrey are also associated to the bass spectral model and therefore to the voice. So there is interactions between real sounds and abstract models and so on. everything is coherent and, more of that, significant, because this is in relation with the libretto, exactly with the theme of the forest in Péléas et Mélisande, or the theme of Golo, but Golo is not on stage, but there is something related with Golo, and we hear the theme of Golo, and so on. So it's quite the same, but it's on the voice coloring, you can say that, of consonants, and the voice coloring is done by the orchestra. So it's quite interesting. Otherwise, in the orchestra pit, a pianist plays on a MIDI keyboard and triggers 80 pre-recorded sounds. It's another thing. And also another thing, the SPAT system from IRCAM is working on 8 channels. And it's amusing because during the rehearsals, they try to deal with a spatialization, of course, around the audience, but also vertically on the stage, because it was in Bastille Opera, the concert hall, so it's very, very large in vertical size, but it didn't work. Why? Because our ears are very bad to recognize the situation, the position of the sound in the vertical range. In this range, it's right, okay, but in this range, it's not very, very. So they abandon this idea. And at the end of the opera, a single chord in a very tight position progressively opens itself during 5 minutes. It's quite long. This is the Clemens love. Clemens is the aristocrat from Tripoli. And the love of Clemens is both celestial and sensual. So, the development of the linear predictive coding process begins in around 1967 with the work of Itakura and Saito, then used for the voice synthesis at the Bell Laboratories by Andy Moore, Kenneth Stieglitz, and Paul Lansky. The best characteristic of LPC is the ability to separate the melody line and the other spectral partials. In consequence, the musician is able to deal with a sort of model of the behavior of the vocal tractus. Tractus, the physiological organ. In speech songs for solo tape, 1973, Charles Dodge composed from the recorded voice of the American poet Mark Strand, who reads extracts from his poem. His poem, the title is The Sargentville Notebook, written in 1971. Influenced by the Filkingen text sound poetry from Sweden, Dodge plays with the artificiality of the result with the significance of the words. The first line of the words says, "When I am with you, I am in 2 places at once." There is a sort of ubiquity, ambiguity, and ambiguity is the core of the words and the core of the music. So maybe we can try to listen. I don't know if it works with the sound system.
Man.
Okay, very nice.
Man. A man sitting in the cafeteria. Sitting in the cafeteria. Sitting in the cafeteria. And one enormous ear. And one tiny one. Which was fake. Which was fake. Tiny one. Which was fake. Which was fake. The days are ahead. The days are the days ahead are.
So it's the beginning of another section. And it's very interesting because the defaults, glitches in the sound is used as a tool for expression, for musical expression, for art. In another piece, in Celebration, 1975, produced at the Columbia University Center of Computing Activities, and in the Navy's laboratories, the text in Celebration, the text is also by the same poet, Mark Strand. The idea is the ritual of waiting the dead in a desperate mood. In the first part, the recorded voice of the soloist proliferates with glissandi and transpositions. In the second part, the polyphony becomes vertical choral, clearly structured in different periods, different moments. Technically, these two pieces, speech, songs, and in Celebration, these two pieces are dealing with the difficulty of mastering the quality of the attacks in the spectral morphology. Spectral morphology. Now, Paul Lansky with LPC. In 1979, Paul Lansky composed 6 syntheses on a poem by Thomas Campion for solo tape. It is based on Fortran, and I don't know if you program with to code with Fortran. It was quite difficult when I began to code. It was a main stream machine with Fortran, and it's quite difficult. The syntax is difficult. So I admire Paul Lansky. It is based on Fortran, and it took more than 1 year to write the code. 6 pieces are different interpretations of the same reading by the actress Anna McKay, and of course, in the work of by Paul Lansky, Anna McKay is always there. Vowels are at the center of the composition with electronics. Now, FFT. FFT was developed by James Cooley and John Tukey, and is based on the Fourier transform. Clarence Barlow named FFT Synstrumentation, a new word, and used it in his piece, I don't know how to pronounce, in Januar am Nil and Orchidée Ordinarie, 1981, for a chamber orchestra. The material comes from the analysis of several phrases in German. 200 words are used, and the FFT gives the spectral parameters from the words, and then the results are played by the instruments. So we understood Gérard Griset is not the same, but it's a process not so different. The composer uses a similar process in Orchidée Ordinarie, 1989, for a large orchestra, more difficult, and maybe nearer with Gérard Griset, I think. So, Psola. Psola is a 4-pitch synchronous overlap add. Psola is like you have a FFT window, but the FFT window is synchronized, really synchronized with one period of the signal. That is to say, in a few words, of course. Psola was described in the Francis Charpentier's PhD in 1988. One more time, the system was developed for telecommunications. At IRCAM, in the 90s, Geoffrey Peters used the technique for synthesizing voices in real time. Philippe Manoury uses the Psola for the virtual choir in his opera K from Kafka and the novel the Procès in 2000. Before composing En Echo in 1994 for solo soprano and live electronics, Manoury worked on the specificities of the voice. For K, the virtual choir is based on recordings of fragments by the professional choir of Paris Opera. With Psola, each voice of the choir, of the virtual choir, is analyzed and re-synthesized grain by grain, I would say. Each part of the choir is controlled, and the ensemble, as with the director, is also controlled by the program. We can just hear this one. The virtual choir. So the virtual choir is turning on itself in around all the concert hall. So you can have the virtual choir like that all in the Opéra Bastille hall. Quite difficult technically. So this is the schematic representation of the system. It's complex, but not so complex. Curtis Rhodes is one of the most important theorists of the granular synthesis, and Paul Lansky uses granular synthesis in different pieces with the two words idle chatter, because he was chatting with his wife on a sofa, he recorded, and after that there is all the composition process. Just a small example. this one was composed at the Godfrey Winham Laboratory at Princeton University in 1987-1989. Now, in colors, in 1981, Slawson uses a metaphoric comparison between categories of vowels and colors, real colors. He theorized the idea in his book, Sound Color. You have the references. Slawson doesn't work with the usual acoustical parameters. His vocabulary is very personal. For him, a sound color is defined by acuteness, openness, smallness, and laxness. That is to say, lack of precision. 4 dimension in this sort of space. These parameters are more or less inspired by the science of phonetics and the parameters for the vowels, of course. He imagined that the 2 first formants creates from noise or impulsions or another excitation by 2 passband filters. So you have a signal for the excitation, then 2 passband filters. So after that, you have something that is not so different than 2 formats. The colors are defined by the parameters of the 2 formats, but not by the source of excitation. So a color is not a timbre, but a family of timbres. We could analyze the way of composing with these 2 parameters, but I think that I have just to show you these 4 graphics, and now I have to talk a little bit about Les Chants de l'Amour by Gridelli, 1985 for 12 voices and tape. In this piece, Gérard Griselli uses also the relative values of the 2 first formats. This time, a series of 28 pairs of values are determined from the analysis of the phrase, I love you. I just have to show you this one. This is the analysis of the beginning. Sorry. Just to...
I-I, on a A-E-E-I.
Just for my students, for IRCAM, by the way, I just pick the voice of Griselli saying the phrase, analyzing, and just explaining that. And this one. So I love you, I, and at the end, EU. And the 2 central frequencies of the 2 first formats here and the vowel here give the articulation, the architecture, the structure of the whole piece. So 28 sections for 28 pairs of formats. You can say that. Okay. Yes. So, I have no time. So, a last analysis, I think that it's interesting for you. I analyze with Archia Comte and Jonathan Harvey because I'm finishing a book, a large book on Jonathan Harvey because I worked a lot with him at IRCAM. And in speakings, composed in 2008 for a large orchestra, and a very, very complex live electronic system. Speaking by Jonathan Harvey. In this piece, the voice is also used as an abstract model for its phonetic parameters. However, here the process is more complex. Now, I just want to try to show you just a little bit of max with realized with the help of Archie Comte, because Jonathan Harvey, when he was at home composing, used this sort of little patch. So you have here the orchestra, and I just pick up a bit of orchestra sound. Here, the original voice. It's really what it is in the orchestral piece. And here I just have to do that. So you can read by yourself, it's not difficult. So with the sound. This is the result on one side of the room. Now, the whole speech. You understand the whole speech? Okay. And the raw orchestra, that is this one. Okay. So the orchestra is singing. The orchestra, I think that it's not really in stereo here. So you can imagine the voice, the raw voice, it's just someone, an actor, a British actor, who is reading a piece of T.S. Eliot in the burning chair. This is like that. This one, and this one is coloring, formatizing, as I say with Archia, is formatizing the orchestra, a normal piece of contemporary orchestra by Sergio. And the result, you understood that there is vocality, artificial vocality, in the orchestra. And what is interesting, I think, that during the concert, there is no voice, never a voice, even an artificial voice. But everything, the orchestra on the stage, the orchestra is always in real time, is colored by voices. There are 3 parts in the piece, like the history of one person or the whole humanity. So the first part is the birth, with baby cries and so on. The second part is the mature person, an adult, with real vocabulary and syntax, etc. And the last part, as often with Jonathan Harvey, it's a sort of a revelation, a Buddhist revelation, a spiritual revelation, with mantra for the voice sources. So, I have just to show this, and to be sure that you understand what I say.
The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne.
Okay, and there is an automatic modelization automatic modelization at IRCAM process at IRCAM, and if we go to the result, and in just a MIDI system, we resynthesize the result. It's that. So it's not too bad. And the concert now. Of course, I have chosen the small part in all the piece where it's very clear and there is no problem to understand what. But in all the piece, it's more subtle as usual in harvest music. So I finished. Thank you very much.
As before, I would like to ask some, but while you're thinking, I'll do so. For instance, I'm curious about the last thing that you explained to us. There are also the popular versions of this, like when you have in a program, like what are they called, Pro Tools or those kind of things, that you get the filter structure of a song by Madonna or Marilyn Monroe, and that you can, for instance, sing a song yourself and then apply the filter structure of the better singer to what you do. So how far is IRCAM interacting with that kind of world? Are the two worlds taking notice of each other?
I think that the main difference is the Antescofo program, which was invented in California by Archer Comte, because the main difficulty is to synchronize the model of the voice with a real orchestra, with the director of the orchestra and so on. And all the system has to follow the orchestra. And I remember the first time, I think that it was in Glasgow, it doesn't work. It doesn't work well. And so there were not a very nice synchronization between the model of the voice, which gives a part of the score, okay, by the automatic modelization and automatic orchestration, and the formatization of the result during the concert. So if it's not a very good, very right synchronization, it doesn't work. So I think that it's the most important difference between everything we know in AudioSculpt and Pro Tools and so on, with different kind of filters applied on sounds, and this sort of composition and this sort of music, because it allows a very subtle possibility for the artistic expression.
So it's really a huge difference, as we hear, and apparently not only resisting complexity, but is there already the second question? Then I would like to just ask one more detail about this. Does the program also pick up in real time properties of the orchestral sound to guarantee that this works well, or does it have to be...
It's just for the score following. That is to say, there are mics in the orchestra, and the score following is working with, of course, the attacks. It's the easier part, but also with the pitches. And in Antescofo, there is really a part of writing the behavior of all the system. Because I did not explain, but there are two spats, two spatialization systems, real time at the same time, with rhythms in the spatialization which are related with the models, of course.